Hey, this is Tracy Lawrence, and you're listening to the Neon Eon.
Hey y'all, welcome back to the Neon Eon. I'm your host, music journalist Thomas Mooney. This week's episode is with Tracy Lawrence. So glad to have Tracy on this one. Such an iconic voice of the era. And like many, I can remember so much of my childhood with Tracy Lawrence songs playing on the radio in the background. Specifically, I can remember Time Marches On playing nonstop at my grandparents' house out in the country, feeding chickens and goats. One of my great uncles, he lived out there as well. He had a little trailer a little ways off from the main house, and I remember him being so dead set on maintaining a semblance of a front yard out there, which anyone from rural West Texas will know that's just a losing battle. But I remember him watering this yard every evening and this pair of mulberry trees that were out in the front. And yeah, Time Marches On, it was on that portable radio out on the front porch. I'm sure no one really cares about that specific memory, but I don't know. I feel like all of y'all have these specific memories that are attached to these songs, which they don't really sound like much of anything, but they probably mean the world to you a little bit more with every passing day. And that one right there, I've not really thought about in a minute, but obviously since talking with Tracy, it's crept back up, and yeah, I don't know. And of course, like, that's what's so great about Tracy's songs. I mentioned it during the conversation, but I feel like I should just expand a little bit more on it here just once more. So many of his songs, they dealt with the passing of time and the passing away of people, the way a family ages and grows, and how values and traditions pass on from one generation to the next. A lot of times it's difficult to understand and process grief, and it can be difficult regardless of age, but I think especially as a child. And of course, I'm projecting a bunch of my own experiences here on a bunch of Tracy's songs since I was a kid whenever songs like Time Marches On and If the World Had a Front Porch were out. But even as you're a kid and you just understand so little about how life is, there's something super reassuring about these songs. And what I find kind of remarkable now looking back is how digestible they are for a kid to understand. And hell, even all these years later, you can apply a lot of those lessons learned from those songs. Anyway, this one right here with Tracy is definitely an insightful conversation, which I hope all of these have been. And of course, hopefully we can have Tracy join us again later on during the Neon Eon. All right, let's run through the shameless plug portion of the show really quick. For starters, subscribe to the Neon Eon, especially if it's your first time. The Neon Eon, it's also on all your favorite social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You can search for us at the Neon Eon. Check out the Patreon if you're wanting to find another great way to support this podcast and journalism in general. Actually, we had a few folks sign up just this past week. Super excited and thankful. There are a handful of tiers for ad-free episodes, monthly merch, and more. You can, of course, check out my Americana-based podcast, New Slang, as well. Episodes with folks like Coulter Wall, Charlie Crockett, Jamie Wyatt, and Kelsey Walden. They're all on there. And of course, I am a writer first and foremost, and the latest interview I did was published just this week. It's an interview with Scott Avett of the Avett Brothers, and it's over on Holler. It's a super easy URL to remember. It's holler.country. It's right there on the front page. I would appreciate it if you go and read it. Links to everything I have mentioned, they will be in the show notes, so check those out if you will. All right, let's do it. Here is Tracy Lawrence. Well, I kind of want to just jump right into the middle of it and ask you about one of my favorite things that you did back in the 90s, and that is those music videos that were all a series. And how did that, like, where was that first idea? Like, who came up with it, and how did it end up becoming a kind of a big thing for you?
You know, I remember it started in the middle part of my second album when Alabama's came out, and during the recording process, we had done a couple of videos on the Sticks and Stones album, and as we moved on to the second project, I thought, wouldn't it be great if we could predetermine all of the singles, because we were doing 4 singles per album. I mean, they were basically getting 4 singles a year back at that period of time. I thought, wouldn't it be great if we could predetermine all the singles? We could go ahead and shoot all the videos at one time instead of doing 4 individual videos. You just do them all together and make them like chapters of a book where you just segue into the next one to the next one. And but back during that period, at least the label that I was on really relied heavily on research. So they would send all the music off to a research panel, and they would grade songs and kind of determine what was the strongest stuff on the record, what was commercially viable. They had a whole bunch of target points that they would go by, and burn factor and all that kind of stuff. And so they never would predetermine all of the singles because things would change as you kind of went through the record, and you would kind of get feedback from radio as the album was dropped and all those things. So you never could predetermine what all that stuff was. And I said, well, how could I get around this and still be able to stream videos together so they would be like, flow to one another? And I thought, maybe let's just time travel in between them. What's stopping us? We can do anything we want to do. So the first one that we did was If the Good Die Young off the Alibi's album, and was actually a race car driver, and that was pretty cool, man. So, and then we just kind of time traveled into each one of them after that. So it was just a way to string things together. So it was a fun concept, and really gave me a huge identity in the video market, man. It was a pretty special thing for me.
Yeah, this was back when CMT would have like those all-day marathons of music videos, and that's one of those like little things that I remember of my childhood. And the music video, I know that before I went back and watched them all earlier this week, was you as like the pirate and the buccaneer, and then like time traveling.
Any fool can see.
Yeah,
man.
And then time traveling into Texas Tornado. So
yeah, it was pretty fun, man. I got to be a gunslinger and a pirate and a race car driver and just all these cool things. It was really a fun series. We spent a lot of money on. We don't spend that much money on videos anymore.
One of my favorite parts is like you have the, I guess like the technology of wearing the goggles, right?
That was front porch.
Yeah, yep. And what's so funny about that is like literally 25 years later, people play video games that style. So I mean,
it looked like I got my kids those for Christmas a few years ago that you can actually put your cell phone in and put the goggles around your face. Got kind of a virtual reality thing.
Yeah,
that I did a few years ago. That was pretty cool. Yeah. Amazing how far things have come.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah. So obviously, like one of the big things that's happened in Nashville since really the beginning has been artists taking outside cuts and like finding songs that work within their artistry and what they're trying to do as an artist. What was that process like, trying to find songs that worked within what you wanted to do, but also like as time went by, like developing that voice, that artist voice for yourself, as far as like when it came to picking songs that you just knew fit within the Tracy Lawrence catalog, if you will?
I had my own system for that back then. I don't really know how everybody else did it, but I was very involved in all of my own A&R work. So I would go to a lot of publishing companies. Of course, Al Cooley, I had a great A&R guy at Atlantic, and Al and I worked really well together. He would bring things to me, but the way that I would make it happen is I would put everything down on a tape. Back then we would get everything would come in. People would send pitch tapes in, and the label and the people at my publishing house and everything would hold everything in these big mailboxes. So I'd get boxes at a time of cassettes, and then it eventually moved to CDs and stuff. But the cassettes, man, sometimes I'd have 2 or 3 songs on them. Sometimes I'd have 10 or 20. And you would get a whole box of them, and I would sit down during a listening session, and I would just go through, and I would listen to a verse and a chorus. If it didn't grab me by the verse and chorus, I'd move to the next song. And I would say I listened to a few thousand songs preparing for every album. And so at the end of a listening session with all the stuff that I'd kept, I would either burn it down to a CD, or I would burn it, copy it down to a blank cassette, and then I would listen to it. and go through the process of this song I burn out on real quick. It didn't hold up after the second, third to listen to. And then I would condense it down again. And I'd get another basket and I'd go through those and I'd mix that down and go through the same burn process. By the time I had gone through all the songs over a several months period of time and whittled all the things down to that final CD that had probably 20 to 30 songs on it, I was condensing and condensing and condensing and really going through this burn process of trying to see what held up the longest to me. So by the time I got in the studio, I already had the album sequenced. I knew exactly what I was going to do production wise with each record. I had a cassette player when I was getting cassettes that I could VSO the speed up. So by the time I got it down to that final thing, I even knew the tempo that I wanted it at, because when I transferred the recording down, I would speed it up or slow it down to where I wanted it that fit into the sequence of my record. And that's how I'd go. That was my process for finding material for my songs.
Man, that's really, really cool. Especially what you're talking about, speeding up or slowing down. Because I was actually going to ask you what happens in that when that happens, as far as, you feel like the bones of the song are there, but maybe you want to speed it up or you want to slow it down because that would work better for you. What was that like? But just speeding the tape a little bit up, I guess.
Absolutely. And I would mix my own songwriting in through all that stuff. Sometimes I'd wind up with a couple. Sometimes I'd have 3 or 4 on a record. Now as I've gotten to a different place at this stage of my life where I'm really not looking for outside songs anymore. I'm pretty much writing everything that goes on my records and have for the last 2 or 3 albums. Mm-hmm. Because I just, I'd gone to some publishing companies and I still have a lot of friends out there. I realize that the stuff that I write's more personal to me, and I don't have to play the radio game anymore. So I'm not trying to cut things that are going to radio. I can put longer instrumentals in my records. I mean, some of the stuff that I'm cutting now is over 4 minutes long. It used to be you want to try to keep it around 3. So I'm able to have a little bit more liberties with the production things that I want now to make the song actually feel the way that I want it to feel without worrying about time constraints. I'm writing things that are personal to me. I've got a group of writers that I work with throughout the year. I keep notes in my phone, so I'm always got ideas at the ready to go write with somebody. I just feel like I'm a much more seasoned songwriter now at this point too. I used to lack a lot of confidence in my own songwriting, so I feel like I've come a long way in that regard.
Yeah, for sure. That's interesting. Now that you mention that, I feel like a lot of guys around that came from this era, you can see a lot of that process for them as well, as far as doing a little bit more of their own writing. And I wonder how much of that has to do, as you said, like, you're not necessarily trying to get radio play, and maybe like the songs that would be pitched, or they wouldn't resonate with you the same way if the songs that were being pitched back in the 90s.
Yeah, I think a lot of stuff you get pitched now. Once you move off of a major label, you don't get the age-old stuff pitched to you anymore either. I mean, the last few times I went to a publishing company, I was getting pitched a lot of stuff, but it wasn't the stuff that was getting pitched to Luke Bryan. It wasn't the stuff that was getting pitched to the A-level artists. You really had to dig pretty deep. And I came out of there feeling a little frustrated that either it was stuff that I'd been pitched 10 years ago or it was just weak stuff. And I felt like, that I could write better, more suited for me than what I was getting pitched to me. And so it's just to remove the frustration. And I get it. If you're not getting radio airplay, the publishing companies, they're in it to make money. There's some of them that have a little nostalgia about them that say, oh, I'd love to have a Tracy Lawrence cut. And I heard that for years. Boy, I sure love to have a George Jones cut or a this cut or a that cut, after an artist has passed that particular stage of their life. And we all get there. It's just part of the process. I don't want to play those games, man. I'm quite capable of writing all the stuff I want. I'm a good songwriter.
Oh, for sure, yeah. I mean, if you look through your career, I mean, there's a lot of the identifiable songs you have a piece in, and
absolutely.
So, I mean, it's definitely there. Going back to like the album making process, as far as dwindling those songs and honing in on what it was there ever like any examples of where you felt strongly about a song, but maybe like the team or like, people around you were like, I don't know, I don't see that, and you ended up kind of being right because you just knew that it worked and like it was going to work?
There's a few times over the years. I know during the recording process of the Alibis album, the head of the label came to the studio. He was really mad at me because he didn't like "Can't Break It to My Heart," and I was really strong on it, and I cut it anyway. And we almost came to blows in the studio. It was really not a good thing. And then it turned out to be the #2 airplay song of the year at ASCAP. So, so after that, they pretty much left me alone. And then I remember on the next album, "I See It Now" was the title of the third album that I had. And I remember the A&R guy going, "Man, I just don't understand what he's talking about with her dancing with her feet off the ground. I just don't get it." I'm like, "Really?" So I had to stand my ground a few times over the years, But a lot of times when younger artists ask for advice, how do you deal with the pressures of the label? I mean, how do you go about this? My best advice to somebody is that you really have to learn to bend. Early on, when you don't have leverage, you're going to have to do some things and record some things that you might not want. But as you have hits and you get the confidence of the A&R people and the head of the label as you move forward, and you can prove that you have good song sense and you know what you want, you're better off doing your own thing as much as you can, because you're going to have to sing those songs a long time. And I do know I have peers in the business that have recorded stuff that they didn't like that have to sing it to this day. And you can tell when people don't like what they do.
Yeah, for sure. Is there, I don't know if this ever happens right here, but um, is there ever like a moment where back then where you had a song and you liked like 95% of it, but like there was a line or something or a word that you just wanted to tweak either because it would resonate a little bit more for you or maybe it just made sense as far as like how you were singing vocally or something? Was there ever anything like that where you know, tweaks last minute
I
to
know
it?
there was. I do know there was. I'm guilty of sending songs back to songwriters many times in the past. I can't remember exactly which ones they were, but no, I know I've done it on a regular basis over the years. And always having respect for the songwriters, would just go back to them and say, uh, if you can make this a little bit more personal, whether it's uh, symbolism or something that tied to me a little bit, and give them some ideas and let them go ahead and make that change on the record. I've done that a bunch over the years, man. Absolutely. I think everybody does.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if like that's something that's kind of uh, happens regularly or if that's kind of like a taboo within the industry.
You know, I always felt like if I had if I was going to cut the song and I had something that I didn't like about it, or that I wanted changed, it was more respectful to go to the songwriters and have
Mm-hmm.
them do it than it was to just make the changes yourself in the studio. So I've always tried to be courteous about that and let the writers make the corrections and do their things. And 9 times out of 10, anytime you get something back from them, they've made it better, or they've made it more personal for you, and that's a common thing. That's a no biggie.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Sending it back to them and letting them, obviously since it's their song to begin with, giving them the opportunity to make it a little bit more obviously better for yourself or better for you.
Oh, absolutely.
So, you mentioned songwriting and growing confidence over the years as a songwriter and a storyteller. Obviously, you had some cuts throughout the '90s on your records, and if you go back through them liner notes, two names pop up a whole lot, and that's Paul Nelson and Kenny Beard. As far as y'all writing a bunch of songs together, what was it about them as far as that you felt comfortable with, but also that you could feel that it was gonna where you guys just mixed real well?
I met Kitty Beard early on. I'll call him KB. That's what we always do. Rest his soul, man. He passed away a few years ago. Kenny and I, Today's Lonely Fool was a big record for me, a Kenny Beard song. And Kenny had his own style of writing. We wrote together a lot over the years. We co-wrote it. The World Had a Front Porch together. And, you know, Paul was just, Paul's one of those true American poets, man. Paul was just a very good lyricist. He had great ideas and great structure. And, I learned a lot from Paul. Paul was like a teacher to me. He was really a very, very smart man. So it was kind of an educational journey. I got a chance to go to class. But you know, we just had good chemistry. There's a few of us in that mix. Larry Boone was in that mix. Paul and Larry and I wrote together a lot over the years. Uh, but a lot of that's changed. KB's passed. Larry has retired and is doing mission work. Paul is retired. I mean, he doesn't write very much. I think I'm probably the last person he wrote with 2 or 3 years ago. Um, so there's a whole new group of people that I write with these days. But I sure learned a lot from those guys.
Yeah, like I said, like if you go back through them liner notes, I mean, there's a lot of names that pop up frequently, and you know, you listen to those songs, and you know, there's something working. There's some magic there.
Absolutely.
So, one of my, I guess, big things as far as looking at this era of music, when you kind of just put when you just pull back and look at like every song that was kind of recorded during the 90s, especially on radio, is that a lot of songs were about adult situations and about adult themes. And when you look at your catalog, I think like one of the major themes that pops out is like processing like loss and processing like the transitions of family. You know, you look at songs like Front Porch or Lessons Learned or Time Marches On. Those are some of those big core themes. Back then, was it something that you tried to write to and that you were aware of, that like this was one of your big things that you wanted to write about or cut songs with?
I don't know. You know, it's a lot of it was just we had ideas and we wrote them out. Or you know, I don't know if there was any method to it or whatever. I think it was just what I felt was the best stuff that was suited for me at the time. It was what was on my heart. I think that's how it translated out. I've had KB used to try to analyze the music that I picked and try to tell me that you like these victim songs and you do this and you do that. And I'm like, I don't have any idea. I just find stuff that I like, and that's what I do. I don't know.
Yeah, well, you know, those songs right there, I know for me, like, you know, I was a kid during the 90s, and I know like those were kind of the first times I remember hearing about the loss of grandfathers or like the loss of parents or how time essentially marches on during, you know, obviously that song. And so I think like, you know, that helped, you know, a lot of people understand how the process of grieving takes place. And I don't know, I think like music obviously can be therapy and can be important for
Oh,
people in
without a
that way.
doubt. Absolutely. I totally agree. I remember listening to songs about relationships when I was, 10, 11, 12 years old and getting emotional about them. I mean, I really liked lyrics. There were songs that moved me and not even having anything to compare it to, just the
Hmm.
feelings that songs gave you. So they've always had that kind of power over me.
Yeah. So like back then, obviously, the interaction between fans and artists was you couldn't just like tweet back and forth, you know. So was there any examples though of like of people coming up and telling you like, hey, you know, Time Marches On meant something more to me because of yada yada yada? What kind of engagement did you have with fans?
You'll hear that stuff a lot, man. People, and not just for Time Marches On, but for all different songs. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Texas Tornado was the one that really moved people a lot. I'd have people come up talking to me about those songs, and still do to this day. Guys that'll come up, and mostly guys at this stage of my career, and say, "Man, we drank a lot of beer to your music out by the fire pit when we was in high school, and all that kind of stuff." I hear it all, man. So I was part of the tapestry of a lot of people's lives when they were growing up, man, and that's really cool to me. It means I've left a little something behind that's pretty special in this world that we live in, to be able to leave something tangible behind for people to consume long after you're gone. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, drinking beer around the fire pit. Yeah.
And you riding around on back roads and everything else, all
Yeah.
those things that are taboo in this PC culture that we live in today.
Yeah, no, no, for sure. I know. I mean, you're probably the soundtrack for a lot of people's college days, or late college or high school days, or shit like that. So I mean, it's um, one of the things that I feel like you can probably say this for any kind of era of music, but specifically for this era, there was a lot of strong, identifiable voices. Whether that's like Dwight Yoakam, like you once a song like of his came on, you just kind of instantly knew it was Dwight, or like Reba McEntire, or anyone really like that. You, I feel, had a very identifiable voice, not just like in your singing voice, but a song of yours would come on and you kind of knew instantly within a few seconds, like, oh, this is a Tracy Lawrence song right here. Obviously building up to that moment and building up to, curating this sound and creating a certain mood and feel of your catalog is important. At any point though, did you ever feel like it was boxing you in and that like, that you were getting maybe pitched only certain songs because they were kind of thinking that you're a certain kind of artist or anything like that?
You always get that stuff like that, or somebody that's I've got the perfect song for you. I've got the next Tracy Long song, and then it sounds exactly like something else that you just did. That was, but those are publishers that really don't know what they're doing, to tell you the truth, because obviously if you've already done it, you don't want to do it again. And those are everywhere out there that really aren't great song people. And I hate to say that, but that's what they are. If that's the way you look at the business, if you're looking at what somebody's already done as being what they're going to do next, then you're already missing the whole point of the thing anyway. But that's why I listened to so many songs. I felt like I had to go through a lot of stuff to whittle it down to the 10 or 12 that finally made a record. But I was very diligent and always have been. I've always tried to find the best things I could possibly find. So, but that's you have the power to deal with all that stuff if you got great A&R people with you. I mean, you don't have to rely on those publishers.
Yeah. Well, speaking of those like identifiable voices, though, it felt like there was like a lot more diversity when it comes to different sonic textures on the radio back then. And now I feel like you can kind of say it's like just this generic Southern voice or something like that. But back then, like there was a lot of diversity as far as styles go. How important do you think it was for the era that there was all these different kind of voices and different kind of artists?
I think it was very important for all of us back then, the diversity. Everybody kind of had their own little clique and their own niche, and they were singing their own music. Uh, you'll find this fascinating. Uh, uh, Rick Beato, are you familiar with who he is? He's a rock guitar producer. He's got a YouTube channel, and I follow him some. He's pretty interesting. So he was doing this thing the other day that he took a Steve Perry vocal and he played and he had it isolated out, so he was able to get the original track, and he spread it out. So he played the vocal, and then he would come back and he would Pro Tool it to where in this day and age he would tune it up with Melodyne or whatever and make it all perfect. And it literally sucks the life right out of that vocal, because once you make it perfect and you take all the little nuances that made Steve Perry of Journey one of the greatest singers in the world, and those vocals are just, I mean, I'm talking about his vocal is always really, really solid. But my point being, once you realize what they do in the studio now, you can tell you got say you've got 10 male artists that have a similar texture or similar style of songs that they sing. Nowadays, they go in the studio and they're going to cut a song that's the exact same tempo. All of them going to cut the same tempo. And once they tune the personality out of your voice, they all basically sound the same. Once you take the little flaws and the imperfections and the nuances that make an artist special, then you've made them all sound the same. So are we making music better or worse?
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. That's like, it's as I said, like the generic Southern voice. Like everyone kind of sings with this, like where you can't really pinpoint where they're from.
You can't tell who they are. Half of them, they all sound pretty similar. But that's what's happening with this technology. We're in our strive for perfection and to create the perfect vocal. You're taking away the little things that make it unique.
Yeah. Well, you wonder, like, if that was around back in the '90s, if if a lot of these identifiable voices, these accents, I think like if you think back, like you have an identifiable accent. Like Reba McEntire has a really identifiable accent. You know, if you scrape
And
all that
John
away,
Anderson and
yeah,
Dwight
yeah.
Yoakam. I mean, the list, and Ronnie Dunn. I mean, the list goes on and on and on.
Well, you know, like what I think like one of the things that I love so much about those accents is that you're able to, if you listen through and you listen to the lyric content and you can feel like where they're from a little bit. You know, you can feel that Reba McEntire is from Oklahoma. You can feel that Dwight Yoakam obviously is from California, or you know Marty Stewart has that rockabilly tinge, or you know whatever the case is, and that's what that's what I think I love so much about country music of that era is that you could feel where these people were from. You know, certain people had a certain Texas flair, or like you know, obviously like if you look at someone like the Dixie Chicks, or you can feel that bluegrass background. And that's to me like the what makes music so important and so essential is the identifiable aspects of the regionalism.
I think that had a big part of it. Um, you know, obviously, I always had the philosophy if I was running a record label, I would want to find artists that really knew who they were, that could bring the culture and the life experiences from the place that they came from, and be able to use that as their musical palette, the way that they present who they are to the public. Nowadays, nowadays record labels, it seems like all they want to know, they want to hear your voice if you've got talent. They don't want to dictate to you what songs they want you to do that fit into the overall picture of their label. It's not about the artist being the best artist they can be. It's about how do you fit into this machine. And they suck the life out of all of it. And I think it's affected the music. Personally, I think it has.
Mm-hmm. Do you think part of that is like back then you guys had a little bit more runway before, you know, signing on to a label or anything like that? That you know, had a little bit more time to develop wherever you were from before, you know, walking into Nashville. Even if like you walked into Nashville at 18, there was a little bit, maybe a little bit more runway.
I think they gave us a little bit more latitude back then than what they give a lot of these artists today. I think they're pretty heavy handed on how they dictate down to what these acts cut, unless they come in with a really powerful management team, and then your management's dictating. You know, so there's always a handler somewhere along the way that's controlling or has a strong influence in what you're doing. Um, you know, I think once an artist breaks out, they have a little bit more latitude. But I don't know, man. I've been out of the system so long.
Yeah. Well, going back like to those days of the 90s, as far as, you know, if you think back, man, there were some really massive tours. And, you know, I've kind of dubbed them as like the t-shirt tours because like all the dates would be on the back, right? What
Yep.
was like your you know, favorite memories of back then as far as being on the road and, you know, playing in front of people, which is, you know,
Man,
few
you
and far
know,
between
it
now.
was a great time, man. It was before the social media and before the cell phone cameras and all that stuff. And you know, a tour bus coming into town was a big deal. You know, people saw the buses rolling in, and there was just something really powerful about it. Now it's like nobody cares anymore. You know, music has lost that power. I don't know what it is. There used to be a lot of anticipation waiting on an artist record to come out, and now you have access to everything in the palm of your hand, and nobody anticipates anything. You know, it's so easy to get lost in the mix with all that stuff. But music was special back then. You know, it felt like it was a great time to be alive, and you know, it was really fun to tour, and there seemed to me in the world that I lived in to be a whole lot of camaraderie. Everybody was proud for everyone. We liked working together. We loved doing the big package shows. We loved getting together on tour. You know, there was just everybody was proud for each other. There wasn't a lot of backstabbing. It seems like there's so much isolation these days. It was a lot of fun back then.
Yeah, there's like that one famous photo of you and Tim McGraw on stage that it's kind of become like a 90s meme in a lot of ways where I think like Tim McGraw's in like denim shorts and a denim top.
Oh, I know the shot. Oh yeah.
Is there at the Tracy Lawrence house? Is there like a, I don't know, filing cabinet of old photos? They could be, turned into a coffee book table or a coffee book.
Well, we have. I've actually kept big plastic totes, dozens of them over the years that have moved around from office to office, and we did a coffee table book for the Good Old Days record that's out, and a lot of those shots came from that. But man, my manager was going through some of the stuff the other day and found the invitation to my showcase, the Bluebird Cafe from 1991 that I got my record deal from. So I've kept everything, man.
No, for sure. I mean, you got to get that framed up now. So.
Cool, man. Well, I enjoyed visiting with you today. I hope you get a chance to chat, and look forward to the next time to see where you're at, how much you've grown. And I was looking your podcast up before, and I know you talked to Larry Stewart and a few other people, so I'm pretty curious to see how you grow, man. It's fascinating to watch.
Yeah, well, thank you. All right, that is it for this one. Huge thanks to Tracy for joining us this week. Huge thanks to you for listening. And yeah, I'll see y'all next week for another episode of the Neon Eon.